Yes.
Is there a requirement, absent the 91A request, to ever release non-public minutes?
So you've held a non-public session. So, and I probably didn't spend a lot of time with this, but there's every non-public session starts with a public meeting. And you're at a public meeting and then you decide, we have a need to discuss a legal opinion received in writing from town councils. You hold a non-public session. And then when you vote to come out of non-public session, what the public body then has to do is to vote. Would revealing the minutes of the just completed non-public session undo the purposes of the non-public session, in this instance, to reveal the confidential communication. So long as you vote, yeah, it would reveal that confidential communication, so we're going to vote to seal the minutes, because we discussed in the minutes what took place, what the town council had to say to us. As long as it's true that your disclosing of that information would undo the very reason for going to non-public session, you can keep those minutes non-public. So there's no reason to make them public unless you no longer have a reason to say that the circumstances no longer apply. Or actually, as the statute says, you seal the non-public meeting minutes when, because I always have to read the statute myself. Where if you would release the minutes, it would render the proposed action ineffective. So long as the proposed action would become ineffective, you can keep the minutes non-public. So as long as it's the opinion of the public body that releasing the minutes would undo the action and making that ineffective action, you don't have to release them. You never have to release them, as long as that's true.
So in your example, 5 years later, the matter went before a court and was resolved, and so at that point, it would seem that it doesn't pass the test.
Right, and I would agree. And then at that point, the board should recognize that fact and release those minutes. I would agree.
So I guess the question is, do they have to? In other words, if there's no 91A request, nobody seems to care, but clearly this is, the test is no longer valid. Is there an obligation for a board to go back and review on an annual basis, say, all of their non-public minutes to determine if any of them should now be released?
What it says is, in the event such circumstances that it would no longer be the case, it would render the proposed action ineffective. In the event such circumstances no longer apply, then the minutes should be released. So what it really does, the statute says you're allowed to complete the minutes non-public if to release them would make the proposed action ineffective. But once that is no longer true, the legal case went to final decision. There's no need to keep the attorney-client communication confidential. You're supposed to unseal them and make them available for the public. The statute doesn't say you have to meet once a year and decide which minutes in the prior year that were concealed non-public meeting minutes they have to be unsealed. There isn't something in the statute like that. But it is a good practice, and it's one that we've recommended to boards, that once a year it should look back at their non-public sessions and the minutes of those non-public sessions and decide which ones no longer need to be sealed and to unseal them. And especially the ones that the most common is when you voted to hire someone. So hiring is a typical session in non-public where you don't want to reveal the decision you've made until you've cut a deal with the person you're going to hire. Because typically you've got 5 candidates, A, B, C, and D. And you're going to decide which of these you're going to hire. And at the non-public session, you've decided to hire B. But you don't want what A, C, D, or E know that you're hiring B until your town administrator has contacted B, made them the offer, they've accepted the offer, and they've signed the contract. And then you notify all the other parties, sorry, you didn't get the job. But if you do it beforehand, B may not agree to take the job because you're not offering enough money, and you're going to have to go to A or C, and you want to hold those in reserve until you've made the final decision. But once you've made the final decision, the person's working for you, there's no reason to keep the minutes non-public anymore. Unless, I suppose, there could be some injury to reputation. So one of the things that might be true is the applicant E told you, oh, by the way, I haven't told my employer I've applied for this job. And they might not want to know their current employer is going to be notified that they've applied for a job for someone else. And so as a consequence, they want to keep that information secure from disclosure to the public or the current employer. So it really depends on the circumstances, but certainly the fact of hiring in Mr. B, yeah, at that point you would make known to the public, yeah, we offered the job to Mr. B and he eventually accepted the job. And at that point, you would disclose that information. So once a year, it kind of makes sense. What I have told a number of city councils, assign one city council member once a year the duty, maybe you give it to the newbie, to sit down with all the non-public meeting minutes and go through them and decide which ones could be legitimately unsealed, and then have that person come back to the council with a consent item. I would recommend we unseal these minutes. And as long as there's no objection, the board would then vote to unseal them and make them available to the public. And that is an affirmative duty, even though there's no one knocking on your door asking for them. Because the statute contemplates you're going to do that once the reason for originally sealing them no longer apply. That's how the statute is worded. So we're heading towards 9:30. So I don't see any more questions. So I would thank you very much for your attendance and appreciate your having me here. Thank you. And I do have an extra packet here in case you need one.